Back on the Sports Authority with Local12.com digital editor and columnist Richard Skinner. And Skinny, throughout the course of the game as I'm watching, I kind of jot down things that I want to talk to you about. And that was all kind of thrown away in the third quarter. Yeah, Randy Bullock missing an extra point just doesn't really matter now.
It's a moot extra point at this point.
Right, yeah. The injury to Joe Burrow, obviously going to be the dominating topic of conversation here tonight and for the next week and months going forward. Initial reports say torn ACL. That to me would be maybe a best, obviously if he was able to come back next week, that would be best case scenario. But the way that looked in the brief glimpse that we got of it, it looked like it could be a lot worse than that.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't Alex Smith gruesome. And how ironic is that, that he's on the other side of the field? That's as goofy as I've ever seen in my lifetime from an irony standpoint. So it wasn't that. And so, yes, in today's day and age, when you have an ACL, that is one that you can usually come back from and come back just as strong as you ever were, guys. Don't lose a lot of athleticism because of that, and hopefully that's the case with Joe. There's also the mental aspect, though. You're standing in a pocket with a lot of flying bodies around you, and human nature is what it is, and we all react differently to it. I think that's the part, and we are so far away from that, it's not funny. That's the part he's going to have to eventually overcome.
And obviously, again, we're going off initial reports. We'll know more in the coming days in terms of the extent of the injury.
He definitively decided, I'm out for the season. He tweeted out before the game was even over, so that part we know, and that makes a lot of sense.
And when something like that happens, everyone on Twitter, everyone wants to point a finger. They want to blame someone because the Bengals' shiny new toy is now on the shelf for the rest of the year, and we don't know for how long. Fair to point fingers this early, and where do you point them if you do?
It's a great question. It's always, finger pointing is an easy thing to do. I do it for a living, so I get it. This one I'm having a hard time with. I can point it at Zach Taylor for having him drop back 45 times a game. I know everybody else is pointing to the offensive line. I think Zach was pretty terse, and I thought he was pretty right on. The offensive line's actually played pretty well. When you drop back, though, 40, 45 times a game.
It's gotten better.
It's gotten a lot better. They're going to get you at some point. Hopefully they don't get you like they got you today. You can point at a lot of different things here. I can also point to it's just bad luck, and it feels like this organization's jinxed. That's not a tangible circumstance. That's not a tangible answer. But there's so much you can point to. I guess for me, I chalk it up to bad luck, and I chalk it up to I just don't know if you can risk having a guy go back and drop 40 times a game and throw a football in today's day and age. You got to run it a little bit.
And Zach made the comment, I don't know if it was last week, and I'm paraphrasing that, there must have been a draft where there were 7 first rounds.
He said 80 at one. He said 80 first round guys at one point, and that's where
there's a lot of really good defensive linemen, and if a quarterback drops back this much, you are rolling the dice.
Yeah, and he dropped back 29 times in the first half, 32 times overall, including the times in the second half before he got hurt. And he wasn't hit a whole lot. He wasn't sacked a single time. There was one sack, and it got overrun by a roughing the passer, a face mask, where Joe got hit. But there wasn't a lot there. So this line has done a pretty good job. Everybody keeps talking about protect the investment. I get it. They needed you can't do everything in an offseason. They thought they were going to upgrade the defense to help Joe out. You thought that Joe and maybe they thought the offensive line was going to be better or scheme around it. You could do that. And you can't do it all in one off season. That's the point that everybody has to understand. In a perfect world, I wish I could go pluck him and him and him and him and him and spend infinite amount of money. You can't. There's a salary cap. There's a draft. You can't do everything. Why can't you get a first or second round draft pick? Well, your first round draft pick was Joe Burrow. Your second round was T. Higgins. How's that working out? It was working out pretty good, right? So that's why sometimes the finger pointing isn't fair. I get it. You want to blame somebody because you don't want the guy hurt.
The expectations for the season have to be recalibrated, reset now with.
I'm sorry.
Well, I guess here's what I'll ask. Do you think that the Bengals do you think Ryan Finley's the quarterback for the final 6 weeks?
He is.
They don't try to go get somebody?
That's an interesting part. I just don't think they do.
And I don't want to.
Because keep in mind, Jed, on this. you would also have to ramp that guy up pretty quickly in this environment where you're meeting virtually. Don't forget, we're in intensive protocols. This isn't like a normal week where you can bring a guy in the building on a Monday, cram him for 12 hours, go out and rep a bunch of stuff on a Wednesday. You're in
Unless
intensive
you're
protocols.
Spain.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, he's an he might be the most exception. Maybe he can play quarterback. He might be the most exception to the rule in history of the NFL.
Right.
But that's really hard to do in this day and age. In a normal year, maybe. I just don't see that happening this year. I think you roll with what you got. You maybe sign somebody to have a third guy now because you need to have a third somewhere along the way. But no, I think Ryan gets the chance. I just don't think it's going to work out very well.
Okay, I mean that leads into the next question. They've got 6 games left. What I think a lot of people were looking at this stretch of games with Washington, the New York Giants, and Dallas,
and Houston
eventually, as we need to see progress to determine whether or not Zach Taylor's the guy to make a lot of determinations about a lot of different guys.
Sure.
Can you hold this coaching staff, players who may or may not need a contract, AJ Green for one, to the same standard that you would have if Burrow was healthy?
Yes and no, because I think this stretch you're talking about was, for me, I think we talked about this last week, I needed to see at least 2 or 3 wins. I can't see 0-7. I can see 0-7 now and at the same time go, well, you know what? You're still to blame for this. I'm sorry for that. There's still a culpability. I still need to see guys play. And I think a lot of this was Joe Burrow was such a magnetic guy that guys didn't want to let him down. They played hard for him. I mean, even Carlos Dunlap, as much of a turd as he was at the end, tweeted something to Joe Burrow today basically saying, hey, I'm sorry for what happened. Best of luck. Get well. Which I thought was a classy act and all that. But I think guys really bought into him. And you've been on enough of those Zooms with me. Guys, this isn't lip service. They thought this guy was the dude. And he was, and he probably still is going to be. I think we all think this is the death knell today. And it is for now, but it may not be for long term. But yeah, moving forward, I want to see, are guys going to play for Zach Taylor? Because I think that's the guy now you're playing. You're not playing for Ryan Finley. You're playing for Zach Taylor. Are you going to play for Zach Taylor? I want to see. I think the first game out of the chute is going to be the most interesting because I think you're going to know that answer. Are guys still playing, or they go, forget this stuff. I'm going to go get COVID and call it a day.
Have we seen the end of Joe Mixon this year?
That's a good question, too. I think now, based on this, that's another interesting part. He's only out in theory for 3 weeks. I mean, this has been a week-to-week thing, right? And Zach has talked to us on Fridays. Some of us call him, we have a conference call on Fridays. Just was making progress week to week. You've been on enough on Mondays and Wednesdays. Week to week, we think he's coming back. We think he's making progress. And all of a sudden, boom, yesterday on IR. Well, okay, so that's a minimum of 3. I don't think the injury was any worse than that. I haven't heard anything about surgery. I haven't talked to anybody that's told me it's surgery related. So after 3 weeks, is he just shut it down? If he does, that shows me that maybe if there's no surgery involved, that he's checked out. And so that's where I think we are with some of these guys. Who checks out, who doesn't? And if enough of them do and they're ugly down the stretch, you got to do something.
With the first pick, or with the first round pick,
yes,
in the 2021 NFL
5?
draft, will the pitchforks be out if the Bengals don't take an offensive lineman with that first round draft pick next spring?
See, I'm just not sold on rookie offensive linemen. I'm just not sold on draft pick offensive linemen. And that I think Jonah Williams is going to be okay, but I want to see guys that have done it in the NFL. Any more college guys, they just don't do it for me. And that's just me. I'm not an NFL scout by any stretch of the imagination. They just don't do it for me. There's just too many ifs, ands, or buts. But if they don't address it with veterans in the offseason, then I got an issue because you're going to have to do some of that.
Okay. Take everything we've talked about all year and throw it out the window. It's a brand new season for the Bengals as they attempt to salvage something from a year now without their number 1 overall pick. You can see all of Richard Skinner's work. He's still going to be writing on our website on local12.com. Skinny, thanks so much.